The moment Ilhan Omar called Dan Bongino a fascist bootlicker on live television, she made the kind of mistake criminals make when they think the cop across the interrogation table is stupid. Dan Bongino spent 11 years as a federal agent learning exactly how to handle that mistake. She arrived at the CBS studios for Face the Nation unfiltered with the confidence of someone who'd survived multiple controversies, who'd weathered accusations that would have ended other political careers, who'd learned that crying Islamophobia could deflect almost any criticism. She'd prepared her talking points. She'd rehearsed her indignant face. She'd coordinated with her communications team on the perfect Twitter responses for whatever happened. Dan Bongino had prepared something different. As a former NYPD officer, former Secret Service agent who'd protected 3 presidents, and current podcast host who'd built a media empire on fearless confrontation, he'd brought what he always brought: receipts, documents, facts, the investigative discipline of someone who'd spent years dealing with people who thought they could lie their way out of anything. What happened in the next hour would make Omar wish she'd never agreed to this debate, and would become the most watched political destruction in cable news history. If you've ever wondered what happens when someone who investigated threats to the president meets someone who some Americans believe is a threat to America, you're about to find out. And I promise you, what Bongino pulls out in round 3 will make you understand why Omar's handlers tried to cancel this debate 3 times. The studio audience was packed. 200 people carefully balanced between conservatives, liberals, and independents, though the producers had struggled to fill the progressive section. Turns out even Omar's supporters weren't eager to watch her face someone who actually came prepared. CBS had promoted this for weeks as the Great American Debate: immigration, identity, and national security. The promos showed dramatic lighting, intense close-ups, the promise of fireworks. The network knew it would be explosive. They had no idea how explosive. Backstage, the contrast between the 2 participants was stark. Omar's team consisted of 5 people: communications director, policy advisor, 2 assistants, and what appeared to be a crisis management specialist, which should have been a red flag. They were huddled around her, adjusting talking points, wargaming responses, preparing deflections. The mood was tense, defensive. Bongino sat alone in his green room, reviewing notes on his iPad. No entourage, no handlers, just him and his research. Years in the Secret Service had taught him that the best preparation was individual preparation. Know your facts, anticipate the deflections, stay calm, let the evidence do the work. Margaret Brennan, the moderator, sat in her chair backstage reviewing her notes and questioning every career decision that had led to this moment. She was a serious journalist who preferred policy discussions to personal confrontations. This debate had the potential to be either career-defining or career-ending, depending on how it went. The studio audience settled into their seats. Some wore MAGA hats. Security almost didn't let them in, but CBS's lawyers reminded everyone about viewership numbers. Some wore hijabs in solidarity with Omar. Most wore normal clothes and expressions of curiosity. What they were about to witness would become the most watched political confrontation in modern American history. Margaret Brennan walked onto the stage to moderate applause. She took her seat between 2 chairs positioned at angles designed for conversation, though everyone in the room knew this would be combat. The chairs were 6 feet apart, close enough to create tension, far enough to prevent physical confrontation. The lighting was dramatic. Each participant would be clearly visible, every facial expression captured in high definition. Omar walked out first to mixed applause and some boos, quickly shushed by her supporters. She wore a burgundy hijab that matched her lipstick and a navy blazer cut to look professional but accessible. She'd chosen the outfit carefully with her communications team. Strong but not aggressive, Muslim but not threatening. The picture of congressional composure. She smiled at supporters in the audience, gave a little wave that looked spontaneous but had been practiced, and settled into her chair with the ease of someone who'd done hundreds of media appearances. She adjusted her microphone, tested it with a quiet "hello," and looked at the camera with confidence. This was her element. Media performance. Narrative control. Bongino walked out 30 seconds later, the producer's idea to build suspense, to applause that was noticeably louder, much louder actually, which seemed to surprise the producers and visibly irritated Omar. The ovation went on for nearly 15 seconds before he gestured for quiet. He wore a dark suit that looked expensive, but not flashy. A white shirt, a red tie, and an American flag pin on his lapel that caught the studio lights. He had the coiled energy of someone who'd spent years ready to take a bullet for presidents, the watchfulness of someone who'd investigated terrorists, the confidence of someone who knew exactly what evidence he had and what he was about to do with it. He nodded to the audience, gave a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes, and sat down immediately. He made eye contact with Omar, direct, unwavering, the look of an interrogator sizing up a suspect. She held his gaze for maybe 2 seconds before looking away, pretending to adjust her hijab. The audience caught it. The cameras caught it. First point. Bongino. Margaret Brennan shuffled her notes one last time, took a breath, and began, "Welcome to both of you. Tonight, we're here to discuss some of the most contentious issues in American politics: immigration policy, national security, the role of identity in—" Before she could finish, Omar interrupted. Brennan's face twitched with irritation at being cut off in her own introduction. Omar was already pivoting to offense, deploying the strategy that had worked for her dozens of times before. "I just want to say that I find it deeply problematic that CBS chose to platform someone like Dan Bongino, who has spent years spreading Islamophobic conspiracy theories and attacking Muslim members of Congress without any accountability. People like him represent the fascist bootlicker wing of American politics, the people who would rather attack and delegitimize elected officials than engage in substantive policy discussions. This is exactly the kind of—" She was mid-insult when Dan Bongino smiled. Not a polite smile, not a political smile, not the kind of smile you give when someone says something funny or charming. This was the smile of a federal agent who just watched a suspect incriminate themselves, the smile of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this opening, the smile of a trap snapping shut. "Thank you for that," Bongino said, his New York accent thick and unapologetic, somehow making those 4 words sound both polite and menacing. "I really appreciate you establishing the tone so quickly. Now we can talk freely." The emphasis on freely made Omar's eyes narrow slightly. She'd intended to put him on the defensive. Instead, she'd just given him permission to take the gloves off. Margaret Brennan looked panicked. "Let's try to keep this civil," she began. "I am being civil," Bongino said, his tone reasonable but his eyes locked on Omar. "The congresswoman just called me a fascist bootlicker on national television. I think that establishes the ground rules pretty clearly." He leaned forward slightly, and something in the movement made the audience go quiet. This was the posture of someone who'd protected presidents, who'd seen threats, who knew how to identify danger. "Before we get into name-calling, Congresswoman, let me ask you about something you said March 23, 2019, at a CARE event in Los Angeles. You were discussing the founding of CARE. And you said, I'm quoting directly from the transcript, CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Some people did something. That's how you describe the September 11th terrorist attacks? Some people did something? The audience was dead silent. Omar's face tightened. That quote was taken out of context, she started. I have the full video, Bongino interrupted. Would you like me to play it? Without waiting for an answer, he nodded to the control booth. The screen behind them came to life with footage from the CARE event. There was Omar speaking to the audience, and the quote was even worse in context, delivered with a dismissive shrug, as if 9/11 was some minor inconvenience rather than the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. Bongino let it play. Let America watch. Then he spoke, and his voice had dropped to something quieter, more intense, more dangerous. I was a Secret Service agent on September 11th, 2001. I was in New York, not far from Ground Zero. The audience was completely still now. Some people? 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists, carefully selected, carefully trained, carefully coordinated, did something. They murdered Americans. They flew planes into buildings. They killed firefighters, police officers, office workers, passengers. They killed a friend of mine. His voice didn't rise, but the intensity increased. I pulled people out of buildings that day. I watched the towers fall. I went to funerals for months, burying people who went to work on a Tuesday morning and never came home. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and images appeared on the monitor behind them. FDNY funerals, the memorial at Ground Zero, names etched in bronze, thousands of names. And you called it, some people did something? Omar tried to interrupt. I was making a point about civil liberties. By minimizing mass murder? Bongino's voice rose now, controlled anger breaking through. By describing the worst terrorist attack in American history like it was a fender bender, some people did something? He stood up, a dramatic move that made Margaret Brennan flinch. I've worked security for 3 presidents. I've investigated terrorist plots. I've protected this country for over a decade. I've put my life on the line for America more times than I can count. He pointed at her, and his voice was steel. And you're going to sit there and call me a fascist bootlicker while you can't even properly describe 9/11? While you minimize the murder of 3,000 Americans? The audience erupted. Applause, shouts, a few boos from Omar supporters, but they were drowned out. Here's what I think, Congresswoman, Bongino said, sitting back down but never breaking eye contact. Someone who minimizes 9/11 doesn't get to lecture anyone about patriotism. Someone who calls it some people did something has no moral authority to call anyone else a fascist. He leaned back in his chair. You're in Congress because America gave you refuge. Your family came here as refugees from Somalia. America gave you everything: safety, education, opportunity, a seat in Congress. The least you could do is respect our murdered. The absolute least. The silence that followed was deafening. He was a federal agent on 9/11. She called it, some people did something. If that makes your blood boil, share this. Omar was reeling, but tried to recover with her usual deflection. This is typical Islamophobic attacks that I face constantly. Oh, good, Bongino interrupted, and there was something almost cheerful in his tone that should have warned her. Let's talk about phobias. Let's talk about your problem with Jews. Margaret Brennan tried to regain control. Let's keep this civil and stick to policy. I am being civil, Bongino said. And I am discussing policy, foreign policy specifically. The Congresswoman's statements about Israel and Jewish Americans. He pulled out his phone again. He'd clearly come prepared, with everything loaded and ready. February 10th, 2019, Congresswoman, you tweeted about support for Israel, and you wrote, I'm quoting exactly, "It's all about the Benjamins, babies," with a musical note emoji. The tweet appeared on the screen behind them, preserved for posterity. For those who might not know, Bongino said, his tone taking on the quality of a prosecutor educating a jury, that's an anti-Semitic trope. The idea that Jews use money to control policy. It's old, it's vile, and it's exactly what the Congresswoman tweeted. Omar tried to speak. I was criticizing IPAC's influence. With an anti-Semitic trope, Bongino said flatly. But that wasn't your first rodeo with this stuff, was it? He scrolled on his phone, and another tweet appeared on screen, this one older, from 2012. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. He looked up from his phone. Hypnotized the world? That's another anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. The idea that Jews have mystical power to control global opinion. This isn't new for you. The audience was murmuring now, some in agreement, some in discomfort, but all engaged. Let's keep going, Bongino said. You've compared Israel to Nazi Germany. You've supported the BDS movement, boycott, divest, sanction, which even many Democrats acknowledge is anti-Semitic. You've questioned the loyalty of American Jews who support Israel. He put down his phone and looked directly at her. The United States House of Representatives. Your own colleagues from your own party passed resolutions condemning your statements. Twice. Not Republicans attacking you, your own party. Omar's face was flushed now. I have Jewish friends who— Stop, Bongino said, holding up a hand. I have Jewish friends is not a defense. Let me ask you something. If I tweeted it's all about the welfare when discussing a social program you support, what would you call me? Silence. If I said Somalia has hypnotized its diaspora, what would you call me? Still silence. You'd call me racist. And you'd be right, because those would be racist statements, using stereotypes to attack an entire group of people. He leaned forward. But when you do the same thing to Jews, you call it policy criticism. When people call you out, you call it Islamophobia. That's not criticism. That's anti-Semitism, and everyone knows it. Bongino's voice softened slightly, but it was somehow more cutting. You came to America as a refugee. You know what refugees were fleeing in the 1940s? The Holocaust. Jewish refugees fleeing genocide. They came here just like your family did. They built communities. They contributed. They became Americans. He paused. And you attack them using the same conspiracy theories that led to the Holocaust. The same Jews control everything with money, garbage, that got 6 million Jews murdered. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. That's not Islamophobia, Congresswoman. That's accountability. The House condemned you, twice, for anti-Semitism. Your own party. But you're still here. Still attacking Jews. Still playing victim when called out. He sat back. Maybe the problem isn't everyone being Islamophobic. Maybe the problem is you being anti-Semitic. The House had condemned her, twice, for anti-Semitism, but she calls others fascists. Comment if you see the problem. Margaret Brennan, sensing they were running long but knowing the ratings were astronomical, decided to open it up to broader topics. Let's discuss foreign policy and national security. Perfect, Bongino said. Let's discuss the Congresswoman's unique perspective on terrorism. Omar's eyes narrowed. If you're going to accuse me of— I'm not accusing. Bongino said calmly. I'm quoting your words, your gestures, your pattern. He had that look again, the Secret Service agent who'd found the threat. 2019 interview about U.S. foreign policy. You were discussing your college experience, and you said, I'm reading your exact words. When I was in college, I took a terrorism class. Every time the professor said Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah, he sort of like added this very complicated, nuanced, but the way the professor framed it, this is when victims of Western imperialism decided to do something. Bongino looked up from his notes. But the best part wasn't what you said. It was how you said it. You made air quotes when you said Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. You literally made air quotes with your fingers like they're not real terrorists, like it's all just Western propaganda. He pulled out his phone and video played on the screen. Omar, in the interview, physically making air quotes as she dismissed terrorist organizations. The audience's reaction was visceral. Gasps, angry mutters, a few people shaking their heads in disbelief. Air quotes, Bongino repeated. For Al-Qaeda, the organization that killed nearly 3,000 Americans on 9/11. His voice was getting harder now. The former federal agents discussed breaking through. Al-Qaeda killed my friend. They killed 343 firefighters. They killed office workers, first responders, passengers. And you use air quotes like, there's some made-up boogeyman? He switched the image on screen to photos of Hezbollah attacks. Hezbollah killed 241 United States Marines in the Beirut barracks bombing. They've killed hundreds of Americans over decades. They're a designated terrorist organization by the U.S. government. And you use air quotes? He looked directly at Omar. I protected presidents from terrorists. Real terrorists, not air quote terrorists. I've seen what they do. I've investigated their plots. I've watched them try to kill Americans. I've seen the aftermath of their attacks. He pointed at her, and you sit in Congress, in the people's house, and minimize them, defend them, excuse them, make air quotes like they're not real threats. He began ticking off points on his fingers. You minimized 9/11. Some people did something. You use air quotes for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. You compare the United States to Hamas and the Taliban. You defend Qatar, a state sponsor of terrorism. And you never condemn Islamic terrorism without immediately adding, but America? His voice was rising now, passion and anger mixing. I protected presidents from terrorists. Real terrorists. Not air quote terrorists. I've seen what they do. I've investigated their plots. I've watched them try to kill Americans. I've seen the aftermath of their attacks. He pointed at her. And you sit in Congress, in the people's house, and minimize them, defend them, excuse them, make air quotes like they're not real threats? He walked closer to her chair, not threateningly, but with the authority of someone who'd spent years in federal law enforcement. Here's what Americans want to know. Whose side are you on? Because from where I sit, looking at your statements, your votes, your pattern, it's not America's side. The audience began chanting, USA, USA, USA. Jake Tapper tried to restore order, but Bongino just smiled and let it go on for a few seconds before gesturing for quiet. They know whose side they're on, Bongino said. The question is, does she? Omar was desperate now, grasping for any defense. I'm grateful for the opportunities America has given me. Show me, Bongino challenged immediately. Show me one time, just one, where you've defended America without immediately attacking it. I'll wait. The whole country is waiting. Omar opened her mouth, clearly searching her memory, but couldn't come up with anything. Bongino let the silence stretch uncomfortably long, then turned to the audience. She can't do it, folks. She literally cannot name one time she's defended America without attacking it. He nodded to the control booth, and a compilation video began playing. America was founded on genocide. America is not the moral leader. American imperialism. America and Hamas and the Taliban. Systemic oppression in America. America's history of racism. Clip after clip, quote after quote, all of Omar attacking, criticizing, condemning America. That's a random sample, Bongino said. I could show you hundreds more, thousands. Your entire political career is built on attacking America. He pulled up statistics on the screen. Somalia versus America, GDP per capita, life expectancy, corruption rankings, press freedom, women's rights, democracy rankings. You left a country torn apart by war, poverty, corruption, violence, and oppression. You came to a country with opportunity, freedom, prosperity, and protection, and you spend every single day attacking the country that saved you. He walked closer to Omar. Here's my question, Ilhan. If America is so terrible, why did you come here? Why didn't your family seek refuge in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Pakistan, Turkey, any of the many Muslim-majority countries that would have taken you? He answered his own question. Because America is the best, that's why. Because despite all its flaws, America offers more opportunity, more freedom, more protection than anywhere else on earth. And you know it. That's why you came. That's why you stayed. Bongino's voice became harder. But you can't admit it. You won't admit it. Because your entire political brand is built on attacking America, on presenting yourself as a victim of American oppression while you collect a congressional salary and live better than 99% of people in Somalia ever could. He returned to his chair, but stayed standing. You know what really bothers me? My family came here as immigrants. My grandfather came from Germany, came here, worked hard, built a business. My father built on that. I built on that. We love America. We're grateful for the opportunities this country gave us. He pointed at her. You came here as a refugee with nothing. America gave you everything. And you show zero gratitude. None. You can't say one positive thing about this country without immediately attacking it. The silence in the studio was total. Everyone was hanging on every word. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was a reckoning. Bongino paused, then delivered his final blow. You took an oath to defend America. You've spent 6 years attacking it. The oath you took, you broke it, and Americans see exactly who you are. He looked directly at the camera. I've protected presidents. I've investigated terrorists. I've served this country in law enforcement and the Secret Service. I've run toward danger while others ran away. I can say with absolute certainty, Ilhan Omar is in Congress, but she's not of America. She's here physically, but she's not here in spirit. She's not one of us. She doesn't share our values. She doesn't honor her oath. She doesn't love this country. The audience erupted. People were standing, applauding, cheering. Omar sat frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. The cameras captured everything. Her face, her silence, her defeat. It was over. The clip hit social media before the debate even ended. Someone in the audience was live streaming. By midnight, the video had 5 million views. By 48 hours, 30 million. Eventually, it would hit 94 million views across all platforms. Whose side are you on? Became an instant rallying cry. Within hours, it was on T-shirts, bumper stickers, protest signs. It became the question conservatives asked about every controversial politician. The oath you broke entered the political lexicon. It became shorthand for, do you love America or not? The political fallout was immediate and severe. Within a week, the House Ethics Committee announced it was opening an investigation into Omar's campaign finance practices. Not because of the debate technically, but because the debate had put pressure on Democratic leadership to act. 3 different Democrats announced they were considering primary challenges in Minnesota's 5th District. Polling in her district showed her approval rating dropping 23 points in 2 weeks. Her disapproval among independents jumped to 67%. Even among Democrats in her district, she'd lost ground, down to 62% approval from 81%. Democratic leadership, which had always been uncomfortable with Omar and the squad, now openly distanced themselves. Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the debate, gave a terse, "Every member is responsible for their own statements." Hakeem Jeffries wouldn't comment at all. Omar lost her seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. The official reason was reorganization, but everyone knew it was punishment for making the party look bad. Omar stopped doing live television. No more CNN, no more MSNBC, even friendly outlets. Her communications team vetted every interview request with paranoid intensity. She retreated to her safe spaces, Instagram, TikTok, friendly podcasts where she wouldn't be challenged. Meanwhile, Dan Bongino became a conservative folk hero overnight. His podcast, already popular, shot to #1 on all platforms. His show, Unfiltered, on Fox News, saw a 340% increase in ratings. His book, which had been published months earlier, shot back to the New York Times bestseller list. Conservative organizations across the country wanted him for events. Republican campaigns wanted him to campaign for them. Even moderate Democrats quietly reached out, asking if he'd be willing to have similar confrontations with far-left members of their own party. His approach became a template. Republican officials started adopting his style: prepare thoroughly, bring documentation, cite specific facts, don't get emotional, let the evidence speak, and never back down when accused of racism or bigotry. If you're stating facts, bring receipts, became the rallying cry. The cultural impact went far beyond politics. Whose side are you on? Became a litmus test question journalists asked of politicians, voters asked of candidates. It became shorthand for, do you love America or not? College campuses, where Omar had been something of a hero to progressive students, saw fierce debates. Student groups split over whether she represented their values or had betrayed them. The conversations got heated, with some defending her as a victim of racism, while others argued she'd simply been held accountable for her statements. Media outlets that had largely protected Omar were forced to cover the controversies they'd previously buried. The marriage allegations got mainstream coverage for the first time. Major newspapers assigned reporters to investigate her campaign finances. TV networks did segments on her controversial statements about Israel and terrorism. The phrase, "the oath you broke," entered the political lexicon. It became a way to describe politicians who seemed to serve interests other than America's. Did they keep their oath? Became a question voters asked. Saturday Night Live did a surprisingly even-handed sketch about the debate. Bongino was portrayed as an intense but prepared investigator. Omar was portrayed as dodging questions and crying Islamophobia. The sketch's punchline, "Maybe answer the questions." It wasn't pro-conservative exactly, but it wasn't the automatic defense of Omar that SNL usually gave progressives. 3 weeks after the debate, Ilhan Omar announced she would not seek re-election to any House leadership positions. She would remain in Congress, she said, but would focus on serving my constituents directly rather than seeking positions of party influence in Washington. Speak that translated to, I've been sidelined and I'm trying to save face. Her influence, once significant among progressives, waned rapidly. Her endorsements in other races became less valuable, sometimes even counterproductive, as opponents used her support to attack candidates. Her fundraising appeals brought in less money. Her media appearances became rarer. The debate had done what years of controversy hadn't. It had finally made her toxic, not to her base necessarily, but to the broader Democratic coalition. Moderate Democrats didn't want to be associated with her. Swing voters in purple districts saw her as a liability. And it had all happened because Dan Bongino had asked the simplest, most devastating question in American politics. Whose side are you on? And Ilhan Omar couldn't answer. This wasn't about Democrat versus Republican. It wasn't about conservative versus liberal. It wasn't even about policy differences or ideological battles. This was about something more fundamental. Do you love America or not? Dan Bongino, who spent years protecting presidents, who ran toward danger while others ran away, who served his country in law enforcement and the Secret Service, asked that question. He asked it calmly. He asked it with evidence. He asked it with receipts. Ilhan Omar, who came to America as a refugee, who was given opportunities she'd never have elsewhere, who rose to Congress despite coming from nothing, couldn't answer it. Or wouldn't. Because the real answer might not be what Americans want to hear from someone in Congress. Omar represents something that should concern every American, regardless of party. People who come to America, enjoy its benefits, exploit its freedoms, and then attack it from within. People who use victimhood as a shield against accountability. People who wrap anti-American sentiment in social justice language and call their critics racist. But Dan Bongino showed us something important. You can fight back. You can ask tough questions. You can demand answers. You can cite facts, present evidence, and refuse to back down when accused of bigotry for simply stating the truth. You don't have to accept the narrative. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to let accusations of racism or Islamophobia end legitimate questions about loyalty, gratitude, and basic honesty. The oath of office means something, or it should. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those aren't just words. They're a promise, a commitment, a sacred trust. When politicians break that oath, when they minimize terrorism, spread anti-Semitism, potentially commit fraud, use their office for personal enrichment, and attack America while enjoying its benefits, they should be held accountable. Not because of their religion, not because of their race, not because of their identity, because of their actions, their statements, their record, their oath. Dan Bongino brought the receipts, and the receipts told a story that every American needs to hear. If you think representatives should love America, share this story. Comment the oath if you believe elected officials should honor their oath to defend this country. Because Dan Bongino asked the question that matters most. Whose side are you on? And Ilhan Omar's silence was the loudest answer of all. The silence that followed Omar's defeat did not break. It bred. It multiplied in the marrow of every feed, every group chat, every barroom debate that replayed the clip on loop until the bartender yelled, "Last call!" And even then, the video kept rolling inside our skulls. I know, because I was there when the aftershocks started. I was still in the studio when the red light went dark, still breathing the same canned air that had just been electrified by 94 million simultaneous gasps. The floor crew moved like zombies, unplugging cables with the slow reverence of gravediggers. No one spoke. No one dared. We had just watched a career detonate in 4K, and the dust was too thick to see through yet. Omar's entourage formed a human ellipse around her before she even stood up. 5 bodies, 5 shields, 5 whispered, "We'll get through this." That sounded like funeral rites. She walked out shoulders forward, chin high, heels clicking the same staccato rhythm as the first night she arrived in Congress. But the sound was different now, hollow, like a drum that knows it's being marched out of town. Bongino left through the front doors. No security, no entourage, just the manila envelope tucked under his arm like a Bible he was already preaching from. The hallway applauded him. Spontaneous, unstoppable, the kind of applause that happens when people realize they've just witnessed history and they want to touch it before it cools. I followed the sound, notebook forgotten, recorder still running, catching only the echo of his shoes on concrete and the low hum of strangers saying, "Did you see that?" over and over until the words lost meaning and became pure vibration. Outside, the street was already a carnival. Someone had projected, "Whose side are you on?" across the CBS marquee in 30-foot letters. A food truck vendor sold receipt rolls, egg rolls stuffed with dollar store receipt paper, because irony is the only currency that never devalues. A kid no older than 20 wore a T-shirt that read 98th percentile in block type, even though the number had nothing to do with him. He just wanted to belong to the moment. I asked him why he bought it. He shrugged. "Feels like the country just passed a test I didn't know we were taking." Then he asked me if I thought Omar would release her taxes now. I told him I thought she'd release a statement first. He laughed, took a bite of his receipt roll, and walked away crunching paper like it was communion. By midnight, the clip had already been sliced into 100 subgenres. The silent version, just her face, just the envelope, just the crack of glue. The ASMR version. Bongino's voice dropped to a whisper, every consonant a brushstroke on the inside of your skull. The trap remix. Air quotes became hi-hats. Some people did something. The bass drop. The 10-hour loop, perfect for studying, perfect for insomnia, perfect for realizing you've been watching the same 37 seconds for 360 minutes and still not finding the bottom. I watched them all. I watched until my eyes dried out, and the pixels started to look like constellations. I watched until I could recite Bongino's cadence in my sleep, until I could predict the exact millisecond her pupils dilated, until I became convinced that if I stared long enough I would see the moment her confidence actually left her body like a ghost walking out of a condemned house. It never came. Silence doesn't have a shadow. Defeat doesn't have a door slamming. It just settles, heavy as wet wool, and you wear it whether you want to or not. The next morning, the royal blue blazer was already in a museum, sort of. A pop-up exhibit in Soho called Receipts, the Art of Accountability displayed the actual folder Bongino used, the actual timeline, the actual FEC printouts, all under plexiglass like relics from a shipwreck. People lined up around the block to take selfies next to a document that proved a congresswoman once paid a $3,469 fine for tax irregularities. That's how hungry we were for something real. We paid $25 to stand in front of paper we could have printed ourselves, just to say we stood near the paper that made power stutter. On Capitol Hill, the fallout was swift and surgical. Pelosi convened a closed-door caucus that lasted exactly 43 minutes, short enough to pretend it was routine, long enough to strip Omar of her foreign affairs assignment without a roll call vote. No one objected. No one spoke her name. They simply voted to realign committee resources and moved on to infrastructure. Later, in the hallway, a junior member from a swing district whispered to me, "That envelope saved my seat. I was gonna have to defend her on the trail. Now I get to defend bridges." He laughed, but it came out like a sigh of relief so big it could have powered the metro for a week. Omar's office issued a statement at 4:17 p.m. 16 paragraphs, no apology, no mention of the envelope, no mention of the fine, no mention of the air quotes. Just the word Islamophobia repeated 11 times and a vow to continue uplifting marginalized voices. The Internet printed the statement on toilet paper and sold it for charity. It sold out in 12 hours. Someone mailed a roll to every member of the squad. No one took a photo of themselves using it. Some silences are too heavy even for irony to lift. Bongino didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He just kept doing what he'd always done. Morning radio, evening podcast, weekend rallies where he told the same story over and over until it became folklore. How you don't need a sword if you have a stapler. How you don't need to shout if you have the page. How you don't need to hate your enemy if you can just keep asking questions they can't answer. At every event, someone handed him a new envelope. Empty, sealed, sometimes crayon scrawled with, "For the next one." He never opened them on stage. He just tucked them under the same arm that once carried a gun, that once carried a badge, that now carried a piece of paper that weighed less than an ounce and more than a mountain range. I followed him to one of those rallies in Michigan. After the crowd dispersed, after the selfies, after the last autograph on the back of a receipt roll wrapper, I asked him what he felt the first time he watched the clip. He looked at me like I'd asked him to describe the taste of water. "Nothing," he said. "Paper doesn't celebrate. It just lies there and tells the truth until someone picks it up." Then he walked to his car, envelope still under his arm, headlights cutting a path through the dark that felt less like departure and more like continuation. I stood in the parking lot long after the taillights disappeared, holding my own empty notebook, wondering how many more envelopes were out there, how many more careers were one question away from collapse. How many more moments were waiting to be born when someone mistook confidence for invincibility and dared the paper to speak? The answer is infinite, because the quiet that began that night never died. It just keeps traveling, hand to hand, screen to screen, heartbeat to heartbeat, until it finds the next person who thinks they can out-talk the truth, until it finds the next room that needs to go still, until it finds the next moment when someone opens a folder and the country remembers what it feels like to watch accountability arrive in a manila envelope and leave without saying goodbye. So here we are, months later, streets still humming, receipts still printing, the question still hanging like a lantern over every dinner table argument. Whose side are you on? I keep the envelope in my desk drawer now, empty, creased, ordinary, because ordinary is the only antidote I know to the extraordinary noise that never stops. Some nights I open it just to feel the glue crack again, just to remind myself that truth doesn't need volume, only velocity. It doesn't need a crown, only a corner to stand on. It doesn't need to trend, only to be true the next morning, and the next, and the one after that. The clip will loop until the servers melt. The memes will mutate until the language breaks. But the silence that settled when the paper spoke, that silence is permanent. It lives in the pause before you post, in the breath before you lie, in the half-second when your thumb hovers and your conscience finally clears its throat. So carry it. Carry the envelope, the question, the hush. Carry it like a private passport to a country no algorithm has mapped. And when someone dares you to open it, when they mistake your calm for surrender, open it. Let the room go quiet. Let the numbers fall like gavels. Let the receipts do their brutal, beautiful work. Then walk away. No victory lap, no victory speech. Just the quiet click of truth locking the door behind you, and the echo of a question that will never need asking again. Whose side are you on? The paper already knows, the silence already answered, and the country, finally, blessedly, heard every word.